In this video, we will be creating a roughness map for the fern we created in a previous video. We will be using the Unreal shader that ships with Modo. This shader will simulate what our fern will look like inside the Unreal 4 engine. Alongside this Unreal shader, we will be using the advanced viewport and HDR images for lighting our environments inside of Modo. Reviewing where we left off, we have this simple plant that was created from duplicating this leaf and populating it around to make the plant look more full. Seeing how we constructed this leaf, we started with this image right here, created the diffuse we're going to be working with, again adding the padding, and we have this as our alpha that kind of cuts out the empty space. So again, anywhere that there's white, it's not going to display that portion of the polygon. Before we get started with the creation of the roughness map, I wanted to address a few material settings that we need to go over really quick. So the first thing that I want to look at is kind of the surface of the leaves. So to do this, I'm going to go to default and change this to reflection. So from here you can see, let's go ahead and turn the wireframe off. Some of these edges are coming up as hard, some of them are coming up as soft. If I was to move this one up, you can see that it's currently based on Modo's default settings. So based on the angle, the edge will either be hard or soft. So we want all these to be soft. So to do this, I'm just going to jump to the shading tree, go to our plane, grab the material, go to the material settings here, and I want to just uncheck crease by smoothing angle. Now everything is going to be smooth. So let's set this from reflection back to default. And the other thing I'm going to do is this little dirt patch. Let's go ahead and delete this out, go to our items tab, and all these iterations of the fern that we had made, let's go ahead and delete those out as well. And then let's delete this plane as well. So at this point we have our fern 05 that we can rename to just fern. Then on the shading tree we have a plant material with a fern diffuse, fern alpha, and then the material. So the next thing I want to look at would be the bottom of the plant. So let's just rotate down. And as soon as the camera is under the plant, we can't really see any more of the plant. So if we switch from default to the advanced shading style, you can see now we can see underneath the plant. But if we were to go to the render tab and then move our camera underneath the plant, hit render, you can see that we can't see any of the bottom of the plant. So what we're going to need to do to fix this is make sure that our material of our plant is selected right here. And we want to just check this little guy right here that says double-sided. And as soon as I do that, you can see underneath the plant. In our 3D viewport, we can see under it. Let's jump back to the model tab. From here, we're on the advanced shader still. Even if we go back to the default and look underneath, we're going to be able to see the bottom of the plant. So again, that setting, shading tree, have your material selected, properties tab, material reference tab, and you might have to scroll down right here and it'll just be this guy right here that says double-sided. And one last thing while we're talking about the bottom of the plant, technically a leaf, the bottom of it looks different than the top of it. In this case, since we're going with a simple game asset, we're going to actually have the bottom and the top look exactly the same. But if you wanted to give thickness to this geometry and then make the bottom of the plant have a separate lighter texture, that would be fine as well. Overall, we're going for a more simple look, so we're not going to worry about how accurate the textures on the bottom of the plant are going to be because we probably won't see it in game. Let's shift focus to the needed steps to get the roughness map working and displaying correctly in Modo. Since we will be making this asset with the intention of putting it in a game engine, we need to change how Modo handles and displays the lighting in our scene to more closely resemble that of a game engine. Modo ships with two shaders that try to replicate the lighting setups of existing popular game engines. These will be the Unreal Engine and the Unity Engine. But just go into this knowing that Modo is not a game engine, it's a 3D modeling software. So what you see inside Modo might not look the same as what you see inside Unreal or Unity. So for right now, we're just going to hide our original plant, and we're just going to drop in a ground plane. And I'll use this ground plane to test out our materials and lighting. So the first thing that we're going to do is give this a material. So we'll just call this rough test. Hit OK, rough for roughness. Let's go to the shading tree. Let's open up our material. And now what we're going to do is just grab this black and white image and apply it as a diffuse color. So with this black and white image, we have a handful of things going on. On the left side, we have a gradient that goes from black, slowly transitioning into white. And then right here, we have some kind of white noise that's a little bit different on each one. Down here, we have some black noise. And then over here, we have a white background with black text and a black background with white text. So right now, Modo is using this material right here to determine the material properties. What we want to do is add a new material that tells Modo we want to use the shading style or the shaders inside of Unreal. So to do this, we're going to select the material, go to Add Layer, go to Custom Materials, and right here there's a Unity material and an Unreal material. We'll go ahead and add the Unreal material. And now we get that added right into our scene. So what I'm going to do is just drag this right below our texture. So now we have a material right here and a material right here. We're going to want to keep both of these in the scene because, again, our material setting here, we had that crease by smoothing angle set. We want to make sure that that stays in. But this one is going to handle the textures in a different way. So again, this guy we want to keep for surface detail. This one we want to keep for texture detail, or the way it handles textures. So now we want to change this texture type. Right now it's set to diffuse color. So we actually want to go down to Unreal and change it to Unreal Roughness. So not much happens, but if we go over here, it's currently set to default. So let's change this from default to advanced. And now if we look and move this around, you can see that there's kind of some subtle things happening. So if I get at this glancing angle, so we can see the area that was black is now coming in as a little bit more reflective. You can see it's reflecting the lighter colored sky, and the white areas of the texture, like this text that says white right here, isn't really reflecting much light at all. So to make this a little easier, what I'm going to do is actually grab our plane, rotate it 90 degrees. We can kind of see how it's playing with the environment, but what we're going to do is change the environment so it has a little bit more things to reflect. But before we add anything, I just want you to check some settings. So you can either hover your mouse over the 3D viewport and hit the O key, or you can hit this little gear right here. Either or, you're going to get these viewport properties. So with these, I want you to be on the advanced options, and we want our lighting to be set to environment right here, and our background to be set to environment as well. So what this is going to do is allow us to see our environment after we add it. So to add an environment, what I'm going to do is, if I have the Modo content installed, I can hit the F6 key, and then there should be a little area called environments, and you can open those up, and then there's a series of environments in here you can choose from. So what I can do is just scroll down, and I could either double click on this subway probe right here. This is the one that I'm choosing. So if I double click on it, it's going to add this environment to our scene. So again, our 3D object's right here, but as I look around, I can see what's going on in this subway. So again, really rough image, but the lighting that's going to happen is going to be based off of this image. So the whiter colors like this right here, this is going to produce light and shine on my object. So zooming in, now I can see the reflections that are happening. Like back here, you can see where we have this image of a lady holding a purse, kind of running, and I look back here, and that same image is right here. So if you don't have the Modo content installed, and again, you'll know that if you hit F6 and you look in here and there's really not any files, here's a different way of doing it. So online I provided you with these two files right here. There's a .lxe file and a .exr file. So the .lxe file is just telling Modo how we want to apply this image. So what we're going to need to do is add this .lxe file to our scene first. So to do this, what we're going to do is over here, we're on the shading tree. I have this little environment tab open, so I'm just going to open this one as well. And if I look in here, there's this Japan Subway 2 final image, and that's just our background image that we just put in. So what you're going to need to do, if you don't have the Modo content installed, is manually put this in. So bring this folder back up. So what we're going to do is take this LXE file first and drag and drop him right under this environment. So again, I don't need to do it because it's already in there. So effectively, you'll drag this EXR file in between this environment material and this environment right here. And again, this little guy has to be open for both of these to be visible. And again, you'll put your LXE file right here. And potentially, when you go to drag that in, a little warning in Modo is going to come up. So let's bring that over. So it'll probably look something like this. So again, it says that Japan image subway file is not found. So what you need to do from here is just say, click on yes, and then that'll bring up a menu that lets you choose an image. So what you're going to do is then select this Japan Subway 2 EXR file. So it might take a second for Modo to load that EXR file, but as long as you're in the advanced shading style for your 3D viewport, it should come in just like we have here. Depending on the game engine or how they light the environment, there will be a similar use of environments or 3D images of places that are used to generate the lighting and possibly even the reflections of a level or an area in a game. And again, there's many different ways to do this, but for this example, we're just going to use one of these environment images. So let's get a different angle of our image, something like this, move it over here, and we'll just bring up that image real quick. So again, we're using that Unreal roughness. So in our roughness texture, the white areas are going to be rough and the black areas are going to be not rough or smooth and reflective. So if we look at this gradient from black to white right here, we can see down at the bottom where it's black, we can see the reflections, but as we get closer to the top, the reflections become less and less visible. So with all this in mind, we can go ahead and start creating that roughness texture for our fern, and then change around our plant material to kind of match this roughness test. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is take my Unreal material, and I'm just going to kind of borrow this and put it down here. I don't need this roughness test anymore, so let's just take both of these and delete them out. Go to the Images tab, and I can delete this out as well. And then on the Items tab, I can delete the plane. And again, if you don't have that Unreal material to borrow from, you can just click on this material here, go to Add Layer, Custom Material, and add an Unreal material right here. So one of the first things you might notice is our textures coming in as black, because right now our fern diffuse is just set to a diffuse color. So what we need to do is go down to, well, left click on the effector right here, go down to Unreal, and choose Unreal Base Color. Because again, we are using the Unreal shader, so we have to kind of use Unreal texture types for it to understand what's going on. So left click, and now you can see our color is back. So let's just look at one of these leaves at a time. And what we need to determine is what areas of our plant need to be smooth and reflect light, and what areas need to be more rough or absorb the light. So looking at this leaf, we will probably want the alpha or transparent area in the roughness texture to not reflect any light at all. Like right now it's kind of reflecting and it almost looks like a laminated leaf. We want to avoid that. So those transparent areas of the texture will set to white. Then the leaves are going to reflect just a little bit of light on the smoothest part of the leaf. This will probably be around the center of the leaf, not the edge. So we'll set those areas in the center of the leaf to be a little bit of a darker gray color, and then the edges will be a little bit lighter. We don't want to set anything to pure black or really, really dark black because we don't want our plant to be extremely shiny or reflecting a bunch of light. So let's open up Photoshop. And instead of starting from scratch, I'm going to use the textures I already have. So this leaf alpha, and then this color texture that we started with. So let's get these into the same file. And again, I just want to make sure that these are lined up so they're sitting directly on top of each other. Go ahead and close this guy out. So let's turn off this layer that we use for the alpha. Let's actually zoom in on this so we can analyze what's going on with the image. And a roughness map is going to be black and white, so what I'm actually going to do is Control U to change the hue and saturation and just desaturate this all the way. So now we have effectively just turned this into a black and white image. So with this reflection, we want the center of the leaf to be a little bit more smooth. So with a roughness map, white equals rough, black equals smooth. So we want the center of the leaf to be darker. If we look at it right here, the outside edges are a little bit darker and the inside's a little bit lighter. So what I'm going to actually do is Control I, and that's going to invert this image. Now you can see these little pitted areas that would be a little bit indented are a little bit lighter in color, which means they're going to be a little less glossy. And the other thing that we said that we wanted to do was have the background be white, white being completely rough. So let's do that. Now let's just save this out as a test image. Name it Fern Roughness. Now let's apply this as a texture, and it's going to come in as a diffuse color. So we're just going to change that to an Unreal Roughness. Now we can zoom in and see where our detail's at. So at this point, taking a look, we can see that it's actually pretty heavily shiny right now. So let's take that down a little bit. So to make this less shiny, what we need to do is get it closer to white. So I'm just going to Control L and do a levels change. Then what I can do is just take this guy right here, slide it more to the right. You can see that it starts to brighten up really quickly. Again, this is kind of a preview before and after. And then again, the other thing that I could do potentially would be crunch these levels so I still get that difference between them. And that detail still reads, but it's just brightening everything up a little bit. So from there to there. So let's save this out and see what it looks like. Modo's going to ask us to update. We'll hit yes. And you can see that just subdued quite a bit. So now we can see we are getting some reflection on here, but it's not nearly as intense. And again, we might have dropped it. Oh, no, especially right here, you can see it pretty well. So let's zoom in on that. So these areas that we had it a little bit closer to white are coming through as not being shiny at all. And then the center of the leaf is coming through as being a little bit more shiny. So again, exactly what we wanted. And again, if we wanted more of these little details in here, we just need to put, zoom in on this, exaggerate these white levels. So again, we could change the levels, we could maybe paint some of the stuff in. As long as we have a contrast between black and white in our roughness map, you'll be able to tell that difference when it's applied as a roughness map in the game engine. So the next thing that we need to address is the visibility of the sides of the polygon, kind of where there's a transparency map. We can still see it, so we need to get rid of that. So we're still in that advanced viewport that's trying to simulate how the textures would act in a game engine. If we were to change from advanced to default, now our textures are effectively broke, but the transparent amount right here is still coming through and we're not seeing that reflective amount anymore. Realistically, that's not helpful. I just wanted to kind of point it out. But let's go to the render tab really quick. Hit render on this. This is our camera. And you can see that we kind of get that saran wrap effect that we want to avoid. There's a little bit of Fresnel or specular amount on the clear areas or the transparent areas of the polygon that we don't want. How we're going to handle this is going to be a little bit different than it would be in a game engine. Because again, this isn't a game engine, it's just trying to work like a game engine. So the way that we're currently handling the transparent amount, we have this for an alpha right here, is again, it's set to transparent amount. So in order to make this behave more like a game engine's transparency, we're going to go from transparent amount down to special effects and choose stencil. So now over here, you've seen some kind of weird things happen, but this shading style is set to default. But over here, we can see we're getting kind of the results that we want. And we can also see the specularity a little bit better as well, or that roughness map working. So if we turn our roughness map off to compare, and let's zoom in to get better surface detail, or a view at the surface detail a little bit better, we can start to see that these leaves have a very consistent specular amount, which is again determined by our material settings. as soon as we turn on this roughness texture, it's going to override the material settings and base the roughness on the map that we just created. So turning that on, now we can see how much better this looks. So jumping back to the Model tab, if I turn my wireframe off, we can see that everything is behaving how it should as well. There's no weird ghosting on the outsides of the polygons where there's an alpha. And again, the lighting in the scene is based off of this environment. So again, we have this really big light up here and another one up here. So if we get at kind of glancing angles from these lights, we can see how the light's playing off, the surfaces right here as we start to kind of rotate up and down. There are technically a handful of other things you could do with this fern, like adding a normal map or possibly getting it ready to be animated for things like swaying in the wind or having a player collide with it. But at this point, you could go ahead and export out the model as a FBX file and use the color map, alpha map, and roughness map that we created to put this fern right inside the Unreal Game Engine.